I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and the day is finally here that I'm getting the chance to drive the new Cupra Born on Australian roads. Now this is like the fourth maybe video that I filmed with the Born. I drove it in Spain, I drove it on a closed racetrack here in Australia. We've taken a static look at the car, but this is the day we've been waiting for. Does it stand up on punishing Australian roads? And is this the circa 60 grand EV that you should park your cash in 2023? I'm going to give you a clear recommendation at the end of this video, and spoiler alert, I'm pretty happy with how things have turned out for the Cupra Born. Well, in today's video, we're going to check out the interior. I'll let you know about the spec of this car, which is a sort of base model with the optional interior package. We'll check out the back seats and the boot, discuss the running costs, and then we'll go for a drive in the 2023 Cupra Born before I give you my verdict. But before we get started, hit subscribe below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Now, there's basically 4 different types of Cupra Born that you can get in Australia. There's only one trim grade and it has no name, but you can get it as a base car for $59,990 plus on-road costs before you subtract incentives, which can be extremely generous, like in Queensland, where the drive-away price of this car is under 58 grand, which is very sharp indeed. But from there, you can add the interior package, which upgrades the interior, the performance package, I think you know what I'm gonna say, or you can do both option packages for a fully loaded Born here in Australia. Now overseas you can get different power levels, you can get different battery sizes. In Australia we just get the big daddy of the lineup, the most high power, biggest battery, longest range Born of all, which is the 170 kilowatt eBoost 77 kilowatt hour version with a claim of 511 kilometers of driving range, which is rather impressive. And that's what we've got here in the interior package, and I think this spec is a really nice way to go. You get the 19-inch wheels outside and passive dampers, so a bit of a cushy ride, which I think suits this car, to be honest. And here in the interior you get upgraded seats. They're covered in Dynamica, which is like a suede like material, and they've got inset copper Cupra logo accents, which look really cool. But both front seats are also electrically adjustable. They've got 4-way lumbar, they've got heating, you've got standard steering wheel heating in this car, but the interior package is also going to add your Beats stereo, which sounds really good in this car. I'm actually quite a fan of Beats stereos. I never used to be, but the sound acoustic is nice in this vehicle. In terms of the rest of the tech, we've got a 12-inch touchscreen here in the center, a bit smaller than the new Cupra Tavascan SUV, which will come out in about 18 months from now. That's got a 15-inch screen. The 12-incher is still reasonably sized, but you don't get wireless Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. You've got to plug in your phone. How old school. And that's part of some ongoing connectivity woes that Cupra is going through in Australia and the rest of the Volkswagen Group. This car doesn't arrive in Australia with the app. It doesn't have the remote cooling features and that sort of stuff that you get in Europe. Now, I know that Volkswagen Group is working feverishly to fix this, but there is no fix at launch, and it's probably unlikely that you'll be able to retrofit the cars. So if apps and connectivity are essential, you'll either have to wait or this car isn't for you. Now in front of us, we have a smaller 5-inch screen. It just gives you the essential speed, adaptive cruise, your route guidance, and your trip computer functions, all powered by this nice leather steering wheel with touch capacitive buttons, which are unnecessarily difficult to use, but we know that the Volkswagen Group is moving away from those. You've also got quick access to your drive modes or straight to Cupra mode, which tightens everything up, as car journalists like to say. Not that this car has adaptive dampers, but it does make the steering heavier and the motor more responsive. What else do you get? Well, lots of storage, because this vehicle is of course a dedicated EV. So lots of room down here in this sort of plush line center console, wireless device charging, massive bin between the seats, big door bins as well, although they don't get flock lining. And in fact, it's only down here on the dash where you get soft materials. Your door cards are oddly hard, which is a bit odd at this price point. Of course, there's other little niggles people have. These buttons here aren't illuminated, which is silly, and that will be fixed at some point. But it's comfortable, it's ergonomic, the technology works well, the sound system is good, the seats are supportive, so all the basics are here in the Born. So the back seat of the Cupra Born is really a story in 2 parts. The first is the good stuff, and that's that it's very roomy, and that's because the Born has a long wheelbase, just like a lot of other dedicated EVs. That means the back seats don't need to be pushed as far forward, and the legroom here is excellent. So for myself at 6 foot, I'm comfortable. My legs are supported by a thigh angle which is appropriate, which is just so rare for this class of EVs. It's more comfy in the back of this car than a Tesla Model 3 or a Polestar 2. Same goes for the headroom, that's good, and we don't have a glass roof here. Now glass roofs have certainly some desirability to them, but in Australia in the hot months they do tend to be really quite hot, and we don't have that problem here, so take that or leave it. In terms of the legroom, very good. Tow room is also fine, and I have the driver's seat on its lowest setting in this car, but you may notice there's no seat next to me. You can get a 5-seat Cupra Born, you just can't take any of the options, and that comes down to rear axle weight limits here in Australia. So this is a 4-seater because it has the interior pack. You got to go for an unoptioned car if you really need this 5th seat. Not that it would be a great seat, let's keep that in mind. You do, however, get a flip down armrest here, which you can use all the time. 2.5 cup holders and a pass through to the boot. Could be very useful for skis if or when Cupra adds a VZX dual motor all-wheel drive version to the Born lineup, which is very likely to happen. Now, in terms of down here is where the more sorrowful story begins, and that's that we have no air vents in the back of the Born. We do have USB-C ports, but all these materials, even the armrest down here, how mean, completely hard, like a Volkswagen Polo, not like a $60,000 Cupra. So, of course, this is a small car. Let's not pretend it's a family SUV. Let's not pretend it's a luxury car. Just pointing out that there are a few areas where you can see that Cupra built it to a price. Good thing that price is very sharp. Now, the Born is a very tightly packaged vehicle. It's actually shorter than the Cupra Leon, which is not one of the biggest cars in its class. And that's kind of the reason why underneath this latched bonnet, there is no frunk on this car. Instead, you've got your air inlet, you've got some fluids, you've got your 12-volt battery in this car. No frunk. Something like a Tesla Model 3 or a Polestar 2 has a bit of space up the front here. Especially the Tesla, that's not an option in the Cupra. Moving around the back of the Cupra Born, and like Cupra's other models, it's relatively unadorned here. We don't have things like model names and badges, but if you come around to the side of the tail light, that's where Born is written. In fact, that's where Cupra puts all of their model names, in the side of the tail light. We do have this cool light bar here that does light up at night and looks pretty awesome. You can see there's a bit more aggressive aero, particularly compared to this car's cousin, the Volkswagen ID.3. The Cupra looks a bit more mean. Carbon fiber badge and boot release, that adds lightness. Now, it's a manual tailgate, and that's fine because this is a small car, and it opens up to reveal a boot that is very similar in size to a Volkswagen Golf and all of those other small Volkswagen Group cars. It's 385 litres, it's nice and deep. As you can see, we've got all of our AV gear in here, so whether this is your first car and you're just really good at boot Tetris, or a second car, I think the Born will be sufficient for most people, especially when combined with that really roomy back seat. Now, there is no spare wheel on this car, unfortunately, which gives you a bit less peace of mind for country touring. Still kind of waiting on a wave of EVs, better prepared for Australia with spares. So what's it going to cost you to run the Cupra Born? Well, it starts with servicing, which is frustratingly required every 12 months or 15,000 Ks, which is a remarkably short interval for a car on a dedicated EV platform, but that's how it is. A 3-year plan is going to cost you $990. A 5-year plan is $1,590. What about energy efficiency? Well, our Chasing Cars highway range and recharging test video will come to the channel soon, so make sure to hit subscribe and you won't miss out on our independent data. Today on the launch program, it was about 2/3 country driving, quite sporty driving, and 1/3 in town. And I can tell you that in the 19-inch wheel version of the Cupra Born, I got 17.5 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks, and in the 20-inch version with the performance package, I got 19 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks. Now, those figures sound a bit high, but we were trying. We were definitely pushing on. Lastly, the warranty for the vehicle is 5 years with unlimited kilometers, but the high voltage components have a separate 8-year warranty. So the moment of truth, we're driving the Cupra Born on Australian roads. This is where basically what it all comes down to me, because we've already known about the spec and the price of this car. We've driven it on closed roads and tracks and smooth European roads and come away impressed. But how does it go on real Aussie roads with their bumps and off-camber bends and all sorts of other features that we get more of here than other people do overseas? And that's why Australian road testing is so important to us. Well, I've got news for you, and despite the fact that we get the highest spec Born with big wheels and lots of power, it's really a pussycat to drive on the road here in Australia. It's actually quite plush, remarkably so, and it has a pleasant turn of speed about it. It's not super quick. I think we might have already deduced that from when we drove it on track, and looking at the claims that Cupra make about the performance of this vehicle, 7 seconds 0 to 100 is nothing to write home about. But that's why, for me, this car reminds me most of anything else of the old F20 generation BMW 125i, the rear-wheel drive 2-litre 4-cylinder 1 Series. Now, that car had enough power that you could get its rear end moving, and so does this car. Wow. Someone who loves driving signed off on the tune of the Cupra Born. It is playful, it is fun, it's a momentum car. So sure, it's only got 170 kilowatts of power and 310 newton meters of torque, and it does weigh quite a lot, like close to 2 tons. So the power to weight ratio is not awesome in this car, but it's got enough get up and go. It'll overtake really quite quickly on a country road with authority, but you can actually use 100% of the power on a fun country road with a 100km/h speed limit here in Australia. And for me, that's awesome, because it's that old adage of a slow car driven fast is more fun than a fast car driven slow. Now, it's a bit off to say this car is slow, it isn't. It's just no Golf R, so don't go into this expecting it to be as quick as a Golf R or a Cupra Leon VZX or anything like that. While it's not outright fast, the Cupra Born has its own thing going. I do think in future there's definitely room to give this car a bit of a power bump, whether that's rear wheel drive with the new Tavascan's 210 kilowatt motor, which is also on the MEB platform, or with a forthcoming all-wheel drive model if Cupra chooses to do that. But the way they've set up the car as it is really pleasant, and we brought it down here to Canberra. We've been doing a bit of urban, a bit of highway, but also using the awesome roads on that run sort of the western spire of the ACT here in Australia, and that road is built for this car. 100km/h speed limit, sinewy, technical, but also some big open sweepers, some hairpins. And the beauty of this vehicle is you can put it in ESC Sport and you can actually allow the rear of it to rotate and then pick it up on the throttle. Now, of course, if you're not the kind of person that likes to slide cars, which is completely fair enough, you can of course drive this car quite sensibly and politely too. And if you go for the performance package with 20-inch wheels, wider tyres, and they're also Michelin Pilot Sport EV tyres, you've got quite good levels of grip and traction in the Born. But interestingly, as it is as a base model on skinny tyres, and this one's even got eco tyres, it's a luck of the draw about whether you get eco tyres or you get Bridgestone Turanzas. This one's got the lesser of the pair. It moves around quite a lot. It's like a MX-5 to the level at which the chassis communicates with you, and that is a lot of fun. So among EVs, there are very few EVs that I would call driver's cars. This is one of them. It's like Taycan, it's like i4 rear wheel drive, it's like Cupra Born. It's a pretty low set. Now, notice I didn't say Tesla. Tesla has fantastic body control in something like the base Model 3. It's got the supercharger network, it's got much better connectivity than this car, and all of that should be given praise, and I do praise those things in my reviews of Teslas. What it doesn't have is finely tuned steering or much fun that the chassis allows you to have, much play, especially in the base rear wheel drive version rather than the performance. The Cupra Born corrects that. So if you love your driving, you really like to get into it, get stuck in on a country road, this car will work for you, especially because it actually has usable range. Because here in Australia, you've got to kind of trek for like 100 Ks to get to a good road, do your loop and go home. The Cupra Born will do that. Other EVs, some of them, like the Kia EV6 GT for instance, is not so good at that because we found it only had a range of 350 Ks in the real world, so you're a bit limited. Here in the Born, it's starting to stack up about 450 in the real world, maybe a little less, and that's quite useful. In terms of things like regen, we don't have paddles on the steering wheel. They are coming to Cupra EVs later, but you can alter your regen level with the drive modes or with the B mode up here, but there's no one pedal drive in this car, so if you love that feature, then you're going to need to look at another EV. But the regen is moderate, and you can kind of cycle between heavier or lighter regen, which works pretty well depending on circumstance in the vehicle. Lovely steering, and the ride quality, surprisingly, is really rather good. At times, the car can get a little bit overwhelmed over like very complicated and repeated bumps, especially while turning on a rough country road. It takes a minute to collect itself, or a few seconds really. But on most other surfaces, the Born has good body control and quite plush damping, certainly more so than the Tesla Model 3 or the Tesla Model Y or the Polestar 2. I actually quite like the ride. If you go for the performance pack, you get adaptive dampers. I think the 15-stage adaptive dampers let you strike a better balance for Australia than the passive dampers, but the 19-inch wheels on this car are good because they soak up a lot of bumps passively, and then the dampers are set at a good spot. They're kind of halfway between comfort and sport sort of thing, and I think that's not bad. In terms of active safety, we've got lane keep assist, we've got AEB, reversing AEB, adaptive cruise, blind spot monitoring, the full set, and a 360-degree camera. So that all works well. It's quite well tuned in this car, so no major concerns there, and it has a 5-star ANCAP rating too. So those are my first impressions of the Cupra Born, driving the car in town here in Canberra and on some of our favorite roads. In fact, the testing roads that we use for Chasing Cars Car of the Year and for our mega tests. We know these roads, we know when a car performs well, and this car performs very well indeed. There's sophistication here above and beyond the price point that Cupra is selling this car at in Australia. In fact, I think you could say that the price is something of a bargain. I get that not everything about this car feels like a 60 grand vehicle. Some of those interior materials are a little bit harsh, but remembering it's a battery electric vehicle, EVs are still more expensive than their combustion counterparts. I reckon this thing is not bad. Hopeful to see updates in future, things like connectivity, maybe some heated seats for the base model, but the way it sits now, I think I can recommend this car. Looking forward to testing it back in Sydney and also performing our highway range and recharging test, which you'll be able to catch on the Chasing Cars channel. So hit subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Have you ordered one of these cars? Are you considering it? Let me know what you think. Hit the notification bell, you won't miss our videos. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.